The AAA gaming space in this industry is just flat out refusing to learn any of the lessons that people have been trying to teach them. But at least it's not been that way entirely across the board. It was really nice recently to see someone who is in a leadership position at Sony come out and essentially say, when it comes to finances, they have been their own problem. Not in those words, of course, but they have been saying, we're making good money in all the key areas that we need to be making money in, but what's holding us back is our development costs. We've been spending too much money. And it was nice to see this acknowledgement because I was like, yeah, I have been saying for many, many years that this industry is way too wasteful with its money. So don't expect me to feel bad for you when you come to gamers like myself and be like, we need to raise the price of games to $70. No, how about you just stop wasting all of your money? How about that? But there was a bitter sweetness to that acknowledgement. And the bitter component is that I have watched this video game industry gaslight gamers like you, like me, for such a long time into trying to make us believe that we are a problem, that we are the reason why they're overspending on development costs because we demand perfection and we won't even look at a game unless it's, as Ubisoft now coins it these days, apparently quadruple A. Just No, absolutely not. But you know what? The really bitter part of this is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that this acknowledgement from them is out there. It doesn't matter that they're finally looking inward and looking for more places where they can be saving their money because they've done it already. They've already raised the price of video games to $70 now. And once that cat is out of the bag, there's no getting it back in. It is done. It's here to stay. And we're just going to have to deal with that moving forward. Thanks, video game industry. So there's a couple of things that I want to do in this video today, right? There are some things that are happening in the video game industry right now that it's another example of a lesson that the studios out there are just not willing to learn. And we're going to talk about it because I feel like they're going to be in for a world of financial pain moving forward, at least for a while, probably a long while. But first, I want to go back to this notion about the waste in this industry. And I want to dispel a few things about this whole argument that they've had over the course of time about needing to raise the price of video games for us, because I know there are some people out there that have believed that hook, line, and sinker. They look at what the industry's saying and they've said to themselves, yeah, it seems reasonable. The price of games have been $60 for a really long time. There's been a lot of inflation and the development costs have gone up. So yeah, raise the price to $70. We only think it's fair. Let's dispel that right now, and then we'll get into what's happening in the industry today. So number one, this thing about video game development costs going through the roof and being unsustainable, it's only unsustainable because they're spending too much money. Yes, the cost of game development has certainly gone up over the course of time, but so has their audience. There are way more people today buying and playing video games than ever before. So that's what you do when you're making more money as a company. You can invest more money in order to make bigger and better products to hopefully not only retain the audience that you've earned along the way, but to draw new people into your ecosystems as well. So you scale the development costs up. And if they have been spending too much money, that is a problem with the bean counters on their end and not with gamers. And number two, even if they did have to make extra money in other ways, raising the price tag of video games to $70 was not it. They've already done this through DLC, microtransactions, season passes, and more over the course of time. So that's a non-point from them. And third, and last but not least, the waste in this industry. As I said before, I've seen this going on for a really, really long time. You don't have to be an analyst. You don't have to follow industry news. You don't have to follow the numbers. You don't have to explicitly know that last year, Insomniac's Spider-Man 2 cost $300 million, if not a little bit more, in order to develop, whereas Baldur's Gate 3, a AA studio game that was massive and won like all the awards last year, only cost $100 million. There's something wrong there, right? So you don't have to know that, though. All you have to really think back to is your time, your history with gaming. Just ask yourself this: how many video games have you picked up along the way in your lifetime only to go into the main menu and realize that there are extra game modes tacked onto the package that you may have tried for like 5 minutes, said, okay, I guess that was all right, and then never touched again? Game modes that were only there because, for whatever reason, publishers felt like they had to include and everything, including the kitchen sink sales model, just in order to entice more people to buy their games. How many times has that happened? Let's just think about multiplayer modes, right? Here's a whole bunch of franchises in the gaming industry that have been primarily single player, and yet for one reason or another, at some point, just to have a bullet point for sales on the back of the box, they included a multiplayer mode. For what reason, I don't know, but God of War has done this. The Last of Us, Uncharted, Tomb Raider, Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, Resident Evil, Dead Space, Mass Effect. These have all been guilty of doing this. And why? Why have they done this? Did anyone back in the PS3 era buy a copy of God of War Ascension and say, I can't wait to dig into the multiplayer on this? No, they wanted the traditional single player experience that they were used to with the original trilogy and the PSP games. Period. Did anybody come off of Resident Evil 4 when they were going to buy Resident Evil 5 and say, boy, you know what would have made Resident Evil 4 even better? A multiplayer mode. No, nobody did this. So why? How many millions of dollars were wasted developing all these unnecessary multiplayer modes over the course of time? And again, this is just multiplayer I'm talking about. This doesn't include other supplementary game modes, and this also doesn't include any of the other waste that's happening in the industry. And by that, how many times have you heard just within the last few months that games have been canceled? Good games, potentially good games that were in development but were canceled. Sometimes there are games that have been in development for quite a while they get canceled, right? There was a Damian Wayne-led Batman game that was in development by WB Games some time ago. And we don't have that today, do we? No. Instead, WB Games went for Gotham Knights, and then Rocksteady Studios made Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, and, well, we saw how that went. We had a potentially really decent single-player experience that people seemingly wanted just disappear after it had been in development for quite some time. How much money was squandered by WB Games just on that game alone? How about all the other games that have been canceled over the course of time? Games that have been in development for 2 years, 3 years, maybe 4 years. And for whatever reason, somebody in a corporate office somewhere got scared and said, you know what? We just have to put this on the chopping block now. Tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of time, undoubtedly squandered. But we're the problem, right, gamers? It's us. We're the ones that have been forcing them to waste all of that money. But they're clearly still not listening, and they are in the hole right now. And I think this problem is only going to get worse before it gets better. Let's talk about this. Gotham Knights came out some time ago. That game was initially, I think, slated to be a microtransaction hell of sorts, and with all the backlash that went against that game, they made some changes to it, I think, so that it was a little less intensive in that respect for people's wallets. And the game came out, and because it was mostly designed around the microtransaction component to begin with, the product that got released to everyone to play was rather underwhelming. And the same thing happened with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Rocksteady Studios made that game, they put it out, but it was designed with live service in mind instead of focusing on creating a great game with great narrative first. And people have responded by just not really playing that game. It's only been out for a handful of weeks, and the game has already been reduced to a 40% off sales price in order to try and drive engagement up. Ubisoft has done the same thing recently with Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones got released, and people are just not biting on it. But it's not working anymore. Gamers are finally saying, we're not going to buy your game, and if the game is garbage after I buy it, I'm not going to play it, period, which means you're not going to get any extra money from me. Gotham Knights, that was a game that was in development for a while, and the fact that it fell off for WB Games, not great. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, that game was in development for like several years. And again, people are not biting on that game. There was a lot of money thrown at that game. And the fact that it's failing as hard as it is, that's going to be a big financial problem this year for WB Games. And Skull and Bones, like, that's a game that took the naval combat from Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, sort of tried to make it its own live service game sort of a thing. And gamers are just like, that's not what we want out of the AAA gaming space. We want actual games that we can sink our teeth into and not things that have been created just to sort of be time fillers for us. That's not what we've been responding to for so long. And WB Games should know this. They released Hogwarts Legacy last year, and it wasn't just a great selling game for them. It was the #1 selling game of the year, beating out such behemoths as Call of Duty, which is no small feat, mind you. And Suicide Squad comes out, and because that game tanks, for whatever reason, between Hogwarts Legacy to Suicide Squad, WB Games are like, well, the AAA single-player gaming space is too volatile. I guess we're just going to have to double down on more live service games. Why? What are you doing? How can that be the lesson that you learned and walked away with? I don't understand. They're just not paying attention to what's happening out there. They have the #1 selling game, a single-player game last year that in part did so well because it wasn't a microtransaction or live service hell. And then they released one more recently, which was a live service microtransaction hell. And that's the one that people have been scoffing at. And they feel like AAA single-player games is not where it's at. Despite all the success we've seen with games like, in the last handful of years that were single player, people ate them up. Elden Ring sold a ton of copies. Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. I just don't know what's happening anymore. But let me tell you what is going to happen moving forward. It's not just a couple of studios like Ubisoft and WB Games. And by the way, they're already seeing this not just from the decline in engagement. The engagement is actually working in reverse, right? There are more people playing the Batman Arkham games now than before because they're so disappointed in Suicide Squad. There are more people playing Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag today, a lot more, because Skull and Bones comes out and they're like, we don't know what this is, but we'll just go back and play the good game that you made that has this stuff in it and more. But all the studios out there feel like, well, I don't know, things are unsustainable. We have to make more live service games because we need that constant drip of money coming into us. A lot of studios out there right now, I feel, probably have these games getting cranked out behind the scenes. They're being worked on day and night, and they're probably deep in the development at this point. So for them to just cancel everything that they're doing and say, let's just revert to a single player model now, it's not going to work. So for a while, these games are going to be worked on. They're going to be released in drips and drabs, of course, over the course of time. And we're probably going to see these things fail more and more and more. And the gaming industry is going to lose a lot of money in the AAA space as a result. It's a really weird situation because I feel like they're just going to see all those losses and they're gonna take the wrong lessons away, when really they should just be learning right now from all the single player games that have been selling and doing so well. That's the kind of experience they should be selling. Focus on making a great game first, gaming industry. And if you're going to monetize beyond that, then you work that in somehow, but you don't design a game based around the monetization model first and then build a game around that. I feel like this is going to have some impact on gamers moving forward. We're going to see a lot of AAA games that are going to come out and they're just not going to be what people want. So they're not going to scoop them up. And the AAA gaming space is going to have a bit of an identity crisis moving forward. Not that that's a huge problem, right? Because there's other options out there. And we're already seeing that this year as well. Not just from people playing older games, right? But they see a newer game like Pal World come out and they'll sink their teeth into that. Like a $30, $40 game. I think that's a $30 game on PC. It's a $30 game. And they can buy that and live their best Pokemon-like fantasies to their heart's content. Something, by the way, which despite Nintendo exclusively releasing Pokemon games for all this time, they've never done the Pokemon thing as well as Pal World does. So That's just another thing that maybe the AAA space should be learning, right? Helldivers 2 is another example. It's a fun game to play first and foremost. It's only $40 and people can't get enough of that game. Those games are going to do well because they put gameplay first. That's what this industry needs to do. Now, in the AAA space, what you might see with single-player games that are going to be developed outside of the live service thing, you're probably going to maybe see smaller worlds. You're probably going to see maybe smaller games. I think an old boss of Sony, PlayStation, actually recently just said, yeah, like I'll just say what I've been saying for so long. I want to see more 15 to 20-hour games, right? Because what good is a 50 to 100 hour game if most of that content is fluff? That's another way that the industry has been so wasteful over the course of time. Why does a map have to be so massive and so expansive if most of the side quests really have no thought behind them and all the collectibles that are scattered across the map as like question mark spots for you to go visit? They don't have anything that's really that useful for you, and they don't really justify the time that it takes to travel to that location, to do the thing, and then get the loot. And then you look at it and go, oh, that's not a rewarding loop. A game that's like 20 hours and is entirely rewarding the play from beginning to end is much more valuable, despite the fact that it's a smaller game. So we're probably going to see the scope reined back a little bit, and I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what projects get made and don't get made moving forward. So anyway, that's some information. That's some stuff to kind of think about and chew on for a little while. As we see more important developments like this happen over the course of time, I'll certainly be talking about it here on the channel. But in the meantime, if you like this video, if you like stuff that's happening in the gaming industry, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe. And also, by the way, I am on Twitch live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I will talk about anything with chat. I'm very vocal, I'm very chatty, and I will often discuss things that are happening in the video game industry like I do on this channel here, but I do it live. So be sure to check it out. The link for all that is down below. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon.